Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Second Party Podcast. I'm back again with my wife today, and wanted to talk a little bit about the collective narrative, collective experiences, and some of the history and what I've observed with these and how they progress into the future. Alright, so a little while back, my wife and I went on a bit of a date night out to Jordan Peterson's show, actually. When we got to the show, I felt kind of a very interesting ambiance, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I kind of felt like everyone around me had a level of buy-in to a particular idea, right?
Yeah, there was a level of shared value to some degree.
Yeah. And what I thought was interesting, and we talked about this a little bit at the show, you felt almost a sense of camaraderie with a lot of the people there, even though you didn't know them. And what I thought was unique about it, unlike another show that we had gone to earlier that week that was more on the musical side, I felt like there was an underlying similarity between a bunch of people, but that there was not necessarily a group or hive mind mentality. People retained their level of individualism and were free to think on their own and come to their own conclusions, but that there was still something that brought everyone together and unified everyone, right? Like a shared underlying goal or narrative that everyone was kind of striving towards, right? Near the end of the talk, Peterson talked a little bit about how it was so heartwarming to see everybody there and that it was representative of everyone kind of aiming up, as he put it, right? Trying to better themselves, looking critically at oneself, looking to grow and to evolve, right?
Yeah, well, you're probably not listening to Jordan Peterson if that's not the type of person that you are. And furthermore, you're probably not the type of person to pay money and go to one of his lectures if you're not the type of person who's looking to better themselves in some way.
Yeah, so, I think that's some of the similarity among the people in the audience, right? There's this shared goal, wanting to strive to better oneself. There's a shared goal of understanding of those around you, of trying to do better for not just yourself, but your community, your family, those around you, to act and work and become a better person, right? That feeling was just kind of palpable in the air, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure.
And I've been in a few other instances where I think that's really been the case as well.
I think it's more than just being in an environment where you are sharing some kind of common experience with everyone around you, or that you have something in common with everyone around you. Because, like, the concert we went to earlier that week, okay, the thing we had something in common with everyone who was there.
Yeah.
And that was that we liked this music, this artist, and we wanted to hear them.
Yeah.
Right. If we go to Chipotle for dinner, we have something in common with everyone there, which is we're all hungry and we want Chipotle.
We want Chipotle, yeah.
But that doesn't elicit the same type of feeling of what you're talking about, because I think the difference is not as much of a maybe deep or fundamental type of experience that you're sharing or mindset that you're sharing.
Yeah, I think it's the difference between having like a shared hobby with someone and having a shared value or worldview, right? You can have certain friends where you both really like to do some sport, or you both like to paint, right? You both have dogs and you like to go on jogs with them. There's nothing wrong with that, but that level of relationship where if that's all that relationship has to propel it forward, that relationship is not going to be as strong as something where you have a shared set of values.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that you can feel that kind of en masse. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been in certain environments where you go into church,
Yeah,
right?
I was thinking about church too.
And yeah, I'm sure I disagree with many people in church on a whole swath of things, right? Whether that be what movies are appropriate to watch or what music they like, what sports they prefer to play, right? And maybe some of those things are even theologically based, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, there's still a foundation that we all agree with and agree to. And from that, we can build a relationship, I think. It's like you've got a really well set foundation versus having a little bit of, some temporary structure built on ground that isn't particularly solid, right?
I mean, I think that's really the key to having a strong community or a place that you feel like you belong or a place that you want to be.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I'm not trying to denigrate going to a concert where your only shared thing with everybody else there is that you want to have a good time and listen to this person's music and watch this person perform and you like the music, right? I'm not trying to denigrate that, just like I'm not trying to denigrate when somebody has a friend who they just play sports with, or a friend who you just go on a jog with, or have some shared interest or hobby. I'm not saying that any of that's wrong, but I do think that having some of these experiences that are based in values and things that are deeper, I think that those are likely more critical. And I think that having these experiences at a number of different levels in one's life, I think is really critical and something that is missing a lot from our society. And I think that we've seen it kind of crumbling and dying out at a number of different levels. I think you used to have a lot more tight-knit communities where not only did people have a level of similarity, but there was also some kind of underlying value. So I think to a degree, certain churches have lost this. And I think that communities, like where one is living physically, I think that this is severely lost on a lot of people.
I mean, could you say that some of that has moved maybe more online, like with Reddit forums or with Facebook groups?
Yeah, that's a great point. I do think that a lot of it has shifted online. And I think that being able to sympathize with people online and find communities for things that may have otherwise been very niche, where you couldn't find someone in real life, I think that that can be really beneficial.
It
But
can also be dangerous, right?
yeah, I mean, I think it can be dangerous too.
Isn't that how, like, the flat earth theory really made ground? Through these niche online communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'm not super well versed in the origins of the flat earth movement, of the modern flat earth movement, maybe we should say. I'm not terribly well versed in that, but yeah, there are obviously positives and negatives. But I don't think that having these online or internet communities can be a complete substitute for in-person communities and camaraderie. I think that there is a level of emotional and physical connection that is missing when you go to like solely online interactions with someone. There's a level of
Yeah, for sure.
there I mean, we kind of talked about this earlier, but there's this tangible feeling in the air when you get together with like a large group of people like that, or even a small group in some instances, where you walk into the room and you just feel differently, right? And part of that that's been discussed with, whether that be concerts or in church services, like some of these things, you can say that maybe to a degree they're emotionally manipulative. Just like you could probably say this about certain things on like The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, where these people are being put into situations that are uncomfortable and elicit certain feelings, just like music elicits certain feelings, just like
Yeah.
physical touch and being close to people changes how you interact. Like studies have been done where if you're facing someone face to face, like head on, versus if you're, like say with your spouse, sitting in a car, right, where you're not facing each other, you're both facing forward, you can't respond to the facial tones and slight muscle variations, that the nature of the conversation changes drastically. And I think when you go from in-person things where you have shared experiences, whether that be with music or talking to people face to face, or just being in the same room with a large group of people, like I think there's something unique and special with that is not the case to the same degree when you go to an online environment. And I think that we need to bring back more instances like that. And it doesn't always have to be on like a wildly fundamental level. Like I think going to a concert is something that like really helps people bond and have a sense of community and maybe make friends. And that doesn't necessarily have a high level of value similarity between attendees, right? That's more of a hobby thing. And yet, even in those instances, I think that bringing people together physically, having a sense of camaraderie almost, is really critical. I mean, you also see that with like sports games, let's say.
Yeah, right. I'm not a huge sports person, but yeah, there's something in the air that
Yeah,
like everyone's plugged into the same power source.
yeah. And obviously these things can be manipulated and made bad, right? Like I'm sure there are plenty of instances where sports fans get out of order and people get hurt or trampled or they're destroying things. Like I'm not saying that bringing people together in a group is inherently positive. I think that gathering together in groups is something that's critical to the human experience, and we can debate to what level that's necessary for a given individual. But I do think that getting groups of people together for a society is helpful. And when we don't do that with a productive goal in mind, it's going to manifest itself anyway. And the likelihood when it manifests itself is going to be towards something negative, I think. Like if you're not getting people together on a regular basis, if whether that means going to church or bringing a community together and talking about community issues, no matter what it is, I think that humans need to be getting together and having these shared experiences, because what this ultimately creates is a shared narrative. And what that shared narrative informs is how you perceive the world, right? And for you and I to communicate, we need to perceive the world the same and different at the same time. Now, that may sound paradoxical, but we need to agree on certain fundamental things, certain fundamental goals, let's say, right? And then we need to discuss how to achieve that goal. And this occurs and matters within a relationship with one other person. It matters between a familial unit. It matters between a block in a community at large, a state, a nation, all of these things. And I think that we need to be gathering at a number of these different levels to try and align these narratives together. And this can be done in a whole host of ways, but I think a critical aspect to it is being in person, at least to a degree. around a lot of other people and having that shared experience. And I think, like I said, this needs to occur at a number of different levels. So, like, it's critical for, like, a couple to go out on dates even when they have kids, right? Which is actually some of what Jordan Peterson was talking about while we were on our date to Jordan Peterson, right? And a family needs to go out and have shared experiences together, whether that means going on a vacation or going and picking out a Christmas tree together, or going down to a supermarket, going to a farmer's market and picking out things after church, going to church together, whatever it is. A family needs to have these shared experiences. And then I think also, and this is really, I mean, you see this degrading at all of these levels, but I think particularly where I've seen it degrade is on like a block and community level. I remember when I was a kid going house to house, knocking on people's doors on, a Friday night in the summer at 6:30, letting everyone know, hey, we're gonna have a bonfire in the backyard. Feel free to stop on over. If you can, bring your folding chair. We've got some blankets. We got s'mores. Bring your kids. And we invited all sorts of people. Whether it was neighbors a few doors down that were retirees who had their kids out of the house, or it was neighbors a couple doors down that had like toddlers. Everyone was invited. And we told people too, like at the beginning of the summer or whenever people would move in, hey, if you see a fire in our backyard, feel free to stop on by. You're always welcome. And that's not something that I see people really doing. And obviously every community is going to differ a bit. But bringing neighbors together for shared experiences on, a somewhat regular basis. I'm not saying it has to happen every week or every month, but even a few times a year, even that makes all of the difference. My parents would throw like a Halloween party. A bunch of houses in the neighborhood could come down to my parents, and kids who were trick-or-treating could get a bunch of candy at one house instead of having to go house to house every time. And people could come on over and we'd have cider for the parents, and we'd have muffins and treats and things like that. And we had tons of people over all the time, and people who we wouldn't normally talk to, or they'd be out of town for all of the winter and you wouldn't hear from them. We'd get to see, and we get to have a great chat with, and you'd have that level of like camaraderie.
How much of that do you think is like a personality thing though? Because like your parents are both pretty outgoing. They really like hosting people. They're very hospitable people. And my experience growing up in the neighborhood I grew up in was a lot different than that.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the same type of like close, tight-knit neighborhood, block parties kind of thing. I'm sure part of that is probably because like both my parents are quite introverted. My whole family is. And so that's not to say that my parents, weren't hospitable people, but like how much of this is a personality thing? Like your mom is like always inviting people over, always like hosting things, having parties, this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a personality aspect to it. I'm not denying that in any way. And I'm not necessarily saying that every single person needs to host something, right? Because not everyone on the block can host a Halloween party. Not everyone on the block can have a bonfire every night, right? Because then nobody would be coming to the actual bonfires. Everyone would just be having their own bonfires or Halloween parties or whatever you want to say it is, right? So I'm not saying necessarily that everyone needs to take this on themselves. But there were other things where, like, my mom would get together with all of kind of the women around the block, right? And it was just kind of like a ladies' night kind of thing. And that rotated house to house. My mom didn't host that every single time. Plenty of other people did.
Yeah, I guess I think what I'm pushing back on a little bit is the idea that this needs to be, like, specifically your neighborhood or where you live. Because kind of like I said, my experience in the neighborhood I grew up in was a lot different than that in terms of like a neighborhood vibe. But that's
Sure.
not to say I didn't have tight knit communities. Like the church that I grew up going to was, you know, a very small church, total, like a couple hundred people, maybe. And there was a really tight knit group of people within that church where, you know, everyone knew everyone.
Sure.
The families, it was like a small Baptist church, right? So if you know kind
Yeah.
of the stereotypes about the Baptist church, it's Sunday potlucks and
Yeah.
luncheons and you know that kind of stuff, and that was totally my experience growing up. So like the people that we hung out with on New Year's Eve, on Halloween, like it was our church group. But that wasn't necessarily just based on our community that we lived in, like our neighbors.
Sure.
It was our church.
Yeah. So I guess what I would say to that is you can have different at these various levels. You can have engagements of different extents, right? So the extent of the engagement with my neighbors when I was young was very high. There were a lot of kids my age and my sister's age in the neighborhood, and I grew up in a neighborhood where there were a lot of families and young kids. So that meant people wanted to kind of get together a lot with their kids. I can imagine an area where the age of those living in the area varied pretty drastically, and as a result, that area not having the same level of community engagement. But to your point, I think the level of engagement in the community that you had at your church was more than I had.
At a church?
Yeah,
Yeah,
at a
for
church.
sure.
Right.
And I
So,
would even argue more so than you had in your neighborhood. Probably.
yeah, maybe.
But I mean, there was a large handful of families that all had kids. I mean, around the same age. When I was going to that church, I always had good friends who were around my age. I was kind of on the younger end of the mass of kids that was all, you know, in the same youth group and
Sure.
Sunday school together and everything. But like that was the community that we hung out with. We weren't family friends with, you know, other kids I went to school with or other people in our neighborhood. It was our church friends.
Sure. But so to kind of flip this around, you said, "Oh, we never did anything in the neighborhood." I've heard plenty of stories from when you were young kids, like young, of you guys playing baseball in the street, hanging out with the neighbor kids.
Sure.
I've
The
heard
kids,
plenty of
yeah.
things where you're going and playing on the other neighbors' jungle gyms and stuff, okay? And
Yeah.
the flip side, like I kind of talked about this earlier, but later on, once I got past the required youth group portion and started going to the optional youth group stuff at my church, there was an absolutely phenomenal community of people who willingly showed up every single week, where we had fun celebrations for Easter and Christmas and New Year's and things like that, where every week people were getting together in community, doing fun activities and games, talking, hanging out, on top of like going to leaders' houses at times and getting together on more spontaneous on a more spontaneous basis. So my point is, yes, the extent of your church community was higher than mine, but I still had a church community. And the extent of my neighborhood community was definitely more than yours, but you still had one.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I'm just saying, like, you started this out by saying the place that you see this lacking these days is in those communities of, like, neighborhoods. And my only thing was, I don't think it needs to be a neighborhood.
So what I'm saying is I think that it's lacking in a number of facets. So, and I was kind of starting at the bottom up. So I think that it's lacking on an individual relationship basis between like spouses, between couples. I think that it's lacking on a familial basis, right? Like my family always made a, always made it a point to sit down together at dinner and eat as a family. It didn't matter if somebody had baseball practice or dance practice after or whatever it was. My family sat down together to eat dinner. Okay? My understanding is that the general population in America where we live does not do this with their family. Similarly, I think most people, and I want to be clear, I'm just as guilty, I'm guilty of plenty of these things as well. I don't think that we have a great relationship with our neighbors, not because we've done anything wrong or they've done anything wrong, but just because we've not put in the effort to engage with some of those things.
Yeah.
And I think that that's lacking. Just like I think that the relationships that your family had with the neighbors were kind of lacking to a degree. And the relationships that I had, especially earlier on at my church, were lacking to a degree. Right? So I'm not saying that we are doing everything right, and I'm not saying that it's exclusively in the neighborhood aspect. I'm saying this spans everything. Okay,
Sure.
so going to Jordan Peterson, right? We've got 1,000 people maybe. Like that's bigger than most churches are going to have on one get together, right? So like that's maybe like a next level up. And then the next one from there is like concerts. With COVID, that went down significantly. I think that that's not a good thing. I think that you go up, like we've kind of worked our way up the hierarchy here. I think if you continue up, there are certain things where you could say, well, at some point things are going to kind of fizzle out and you're not going to be able to get everyone together. Like, yeah, you're not going to be able to get everyone in a state together, but there are certain things like our state has a particularly large state fair. And yeah, not everyone goes to the state fair and you don't meet everyone at the state fair, but when you go there, you get a serious feeling like, wow, everyone here, for the most part, is, from my state or from a neighboring state real close to a border or something.
We're
They're
connected
coming over
in some way.
Yeah, we're all
Yeah.
connected in this way. We've got, even if the shared experience between me and other people at the state fair is like they go through the same kind of change of the seasons and they root for the same sports teams as me, right? Even if it's that, there's still a level of like camaraderie amongst people that I think is really critical. Like that's kind of the state level. And then if we go up from there, right, like the national level, obviously, especially in the US, you're not going to be able to get everyone in the US together. You're not even going to be able to get, 1 million people together to try and talk about something really. But there are certain shared experiences that people will have across an entire nation, both positive and negative, right?
Well, yeah, like you're talking about patriotism or a sense of national unity over a set of goals or ideals. Right? That's it. The idea that America was founded on was unity over a set of basic principles of freedom.
Yeah, I mean,
And then within that being able to be like a melting pot, right? Isn't that what they called it? Where people from all different walks of life and all different cultures can come together and, in theory, right, like experience all the same opportunities. And obviously America has not gotten that perfect over her lifetime, but like that's the idea of
Yeah.
being unified on a national level under shared goals and principles. I
Yeah.
mean, I think a lot of people nowadays would agree that America is losing that sense of shared value.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I would add to that is some of how you foster these relationships is indirect, right? So me fostering a relationship with you is not just, oh, let's sit down and have a discussion about our future. Let's have a discussion about and get aligned on finances or goals for this year, right? it can't always be that. There also has to be some fun to it. We have to go out and we have to go to a concert together. We have to go out and just sit down and have dinner. We have to go out and, just go grocery shopping together. Just even
So
working
fun.
on, yeah, but even
Grocery
working,
shopping.
I'm not saying it's crazy fun, but when you're grocery shopping with your significant other, right, you're both kind of relying on each other. Somebody is maybe leading, somebody is working on getting things. You're walking around together, you're observing the world together, right? You're pointing out like, "Oh, look at this silly thing that's over there," or "Can you believe this terrible movie they're trying to sell to people for $30," or whatever the thing
Yeah, I
is.
mean they're doing something together,
Yeah.
experiencing something in the physical world more than just, binging the latest Netflix show on your couch after the kids are asleep or whatever.
Yeah. So then the other thing that I would say is if we're taking that, because I think this is a question that would naturally stem out of that, is it's pretty clear how you foster that relationship, at least I think, on an individual level, right? Where there are two sides. One, we're sitting down and having a serious conversation about something, right? How to raise kids, finances, whatever. And then there's the general communication side of things with shared experiences. And that can be going out to dinner, going shopping together, whatever. Okay. I think it's pretty easy to expand that to a familial level because they're similar things. A community, I think, again, it's relatively easy, right? You're talking to people about some of the things going on in the community, whether that's construction or the school system or busing or whatever it is, and you're getting together to have a bonfire. I think some of the question around that, I think, comes in when you start looking at larger levels. And I think while we're missing the shared values on a larger scale as well, that's not the only thing that's missing. There are also missing shared experiences that are unrelated to the values. So in the past, we used to have movies and films that everyone and their grandma had seen and you could talk about.
Everyone needs to tune in on Tuesday nights for
Exactly.
Friends or whatever show that everyone
Yeah.
was watching.
Because there used to be like 3 or 4 channels on TV.
Or, I mean, war, right?
Yeah, war, tragedies
about-
like 9/11,
Yeah.
like Pearl Harbor, right? These are things that I'm not obviously these are terrible, horrible, tragic events. They do serve to bring people together though. When you have things like Kennedy coming out and giving his speech where he lets the nation know we are going to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
This is a collective goal that we're setting, right? We're missing that. We're also missing that shared experience on like a fun level. Like I don't remember the last blockbuster movie that I could talk to like my grandma about, and I could go talk to work colleagues about, and I could talk to some kid about, and everyone's just so stoked about this. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe you've got Avengers, Endgame, or Infinity War. Those were pretty big.
Yeah. Or I was also thinking about this earlier, but more recently when we went to see the new Spider-Man movie, No Way Home.
That was pretty big.
That
yeah.
was, I mean, that was huge when it came out. And like we went to see it on opening weekend and we were at some showing. It might even have been the day it came out, but that night.
Mm-hmm.
And, the theater was full. And
Yeah.
it wasn't full of, it was full of people who were Star Wars fans. Sorry, not Star Wars.
For Marvel fans.
Spider-Man.
And Spider-Man fans.
Specifically Spider-Man fans.
Yeah.
And it was tangible in the air that connection that everyone had.
People were
And
psyched.
people were so excited,
Yeah.
and it was just a contagious energy to where I like Spider-Man, right? I don't get all worked up about superhero movies.
Yeah, you're
I'm
not cosplaying.
No, I'm not.
But they're fun.
But I was up there waving my fist in the air and like, yeah, like because the whole theater was excited.
Yeah.
And everyone in the theater was like, it was a very dynamic type of watching experience.
Yeah.
Unlike I've ever had before. And it was a lot of fun. And I felt like there's two sides to this coin, because it was a lot of fun. And I felt like this urge rising up in me to like, shout along with when everyone else was so excited because, blank came onto the screen. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like this undeniable urge to just like join in and shout, but that's a little bit dangerous too, right?
Yeah, but
this urge to just join the collective, like it also, in a kind of eerie way, made me think about 1984. Not that this was a bad experience watching Spider-Man, but
yeah, but I guess what I'm positing is that no matter what happens, there people need that level of connection, and I'd rather have it in the Spider-Man movie in the theater when there's a 5-year-old kid in front of me who's just stoked to be there, and there's a 70-year-old couple walking in the back and they're grinning ear to ear with popcorn in their hands. I'd rather have it that way than have it manifest in a really negative or potentially even violent way. And I'm saying, I think that too often we're lacking things like that. Even something like some of these Marvel movies, where I really think that it's a positive to bring people together like this. I think there are few rare instances where we actually have this, and even instances where there is something like that, I think that it doesn't quite stand up in terms of population percentage buy-in to what there was in the past.
Do you think we're lacking it, or do you think it's just maybe shifted more negative, or maybe like cliquey almost?
So I think it has become fragmented.
Right. Like
I
think you do get these small groups of people that almost like, this was going to be another one of my questions of how do you differentiate between that in a positive way and just putting yourself in a place where you're just in an echo chamber, right? You're in some community, some small, like maybe fringe group of people that believe a certain thing, and there can be a sense of community and connection around that. But isn't that also like what cults do? Like cults capitalize on this sense of feeling like you're a part of an exclusive community and exploiting that in people. Or if you think about mob rule, mob mentality, like people, these can be harnessed in very negative ways, like you said. Do you think we are just lacking that ability to connect over communal experiences? Or do you think maybe we just see it in more, I think you said fragmented or more negative ways manifesting?
So what I'm positing is that as we take positive experiences and we fragment them, the need for communities to come together will be served one way or another, whether positive or negative.
So what do you mean when you say when we take positive experiences and fragment them?
Sure. So let's examine the advent of online streaming services. Okay. If we go back in time 30, 40 years, we're looking at basically, maybe you have to go 40 or 50 years. I don't know. You're looking at in the not too distant past, okay? Whether it's on television or in newspapers, the number of options that people have to buy into a collective narrative is very small. As a result, you have everyone, at least to some degree, on the same page. There's some level of shared experience. even if that's not on the value and fundamental level, at least we're all sitting down and everyone's watching The Tonight Show because that's the coolest thing on television, and there are 3 channels, and that's clearly multiple steps above the other 2 at this time slot, right? Or there's some huge show like Seinfeld, let's say. There aren't that many channels, there aren't that many options, and that's clearly better than the other options, so everyone's watching it. Okay? What happens then is 2 things. One, it fills the need that I think people have to congregate and share a narrative. And because we have a shared narrative and to a degree experience watching that show, and everyone is in on it. Everyone, right? It's not like, oh, Stranger Things. Okay,
Yeah.
to watch Stranger Things, you need to have Netflix.
There's a smaller niche
yeah.
group of people who are into it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to stress, maybe there are more people who watched Stranger Things than people who would watch Seinfeld live. Maybe, but that's not what's relevant here. What's relevant is the proportion of the population that are doing both of these things. Okay, the portion of the population that was watching Seinfeld or a massive show like that was huge. Okay, and it has everyone to some degree on the same wavelength. So then what happens is when I start having a disagreement, I, as in somebody back in that time, start having a disagreement with somebody at work, I understand and I view that person in a light of more similarity because I understand that shared experience. The problem now is things have become so fragmented. Even to watch something like Stranger Things, let's say, which was a massive, big phenomena show, just like, or Game of Thrones, let's say. Okay? To watch any of those, you have to have bought into a streaming service, which is a subsect of the population, and you need to be thoughtful and understanding enough to use technology and get access to that and watch it. And I'm sure plenty of our listeners will be like, yeah, well, that's not that difficult. You make an account, enter stuff. But like, we used to have people all watching the same thing.
Well, and part of that I think just comes with we have so many more options now, because how many streaming services are there? Like 20 years ago.
Yeah, I couldn't even name them all.
Not 20 years ago. I don't know when Netflix became a thing, but back in the early days of Netflix, like there were not 15 Netflixes like there are now. And nowadays it also seems like, the rare times that I'm actually watching something on like cable television, and I'm seeing ads and stuff. Nowadays it seems like every month there's some new dumb NBC show that, looks like it was, the concept was scratched together on a piece of paper that someone thought of while they were eating lunch one day. And it's not like some fleshed out concept made into a show. It seems like just some dumb little thing someone had an idea about, and it's like, let's make a show out of this. And so they did. And things are getting so diluted. We're getting quantity of things over quality. And so people are just being split up across more things that there just aren't as many people following a certain thing. If we're following on the example of television shows or media consumption like that. I mean, even YouTube, you could throw YouTube. Like, some people don't really consume television, but they watch a lot of YouTube. Like, there are just so many options.
Yeah, so, like, let's talk about YouTube for a second, because that's a massive platform. Now, I don't think that YouTube is necessarily the solution here, but I think that it's illustrative of and kind of a microcosm of the problem that we're seeing here. Okay, when I log into YouTube, we kind of joke about this because my Google account is logged into YouTube on our television. right? So you'll go off on your own, you'll watch whatever YouTube videos, and then when we go and we sit down and we want to watch something quick on the TV, we pull up my YouTube account, and you scroll around kind of chuckling at some of the recommendations that I have.
Interesting.
Yeah, because it's curated to me, and me precisely.
Yeah.
It's designed for that. And yours is radically different, even though we watch some of the same things, because the smallest difference can create a massive difference in recommendation. Okay? I remember back in the early days of YouTube, there were multiple videos where I swear every single person and their tech-savvy grandma who was on the internet had seen that.
Yeah.
Okay, like
Charlie bit my finger.
Yeah, Charlie bit my finger, right? We've got like some of the original Dude Perfect trick shot videos. Yeah. We've got
Okay Go.
Epic Mealtime. Yeah, the Epic Go with the treadmills.
Okay Go.
Yeah.
You said Epic Go.
Oh, I was thinking Epic Mealtime.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know what that is, but...
Oh, okay. Have you seen the shirts that go like bacon strips and more bacon strips and... Okay, basically what they would do is they'd buy a bunch of junk food and they'd make like the largest insert thing here. So they would make I don't know, like a 50-pound lasagna out of Big Macs.
Okay.
Okay, and then they'd eat it, and it was a bunch of college students. Okay. But my point is, you'd have these things where, I swear, like, you go into school and everyone would be watching. You go into work and people were sharing the video around. Every single person had watched the new Epic Mealtime video, the new Trick Shot video, the new whatever.
I mean, you do still get viral things, but I do feel like even things going viral these days, you're not as guaranteed for as many people that you encounter to have seen the things. Like, it's like people who are on TikTok see the viral TikTok things.
Exactly.
But not everyone's on TikTok.
Yeah, you're fragmented based on platform now.
Yeah.
Something can go viral on Twitter.
Or tweets go viral, and I see all the viral tweets because I'm on Twitter a fair amount, but you don't.
Yeah.
My parents don't.
Yeah, or I hear about some of these things like, oh, the new latest TikTok dance craze has kids, I don't know, whatever it is.
Cinnamon, I don't know.
Yeah, whatever the new stupid thing on TikTok is, has kids dancing on cop cars and 17 kids have been arrested or whatever.
Do you remember planking?
Yeah, okay, that's a great example of like planking was so big, it was like that, it was referenced in The Office.
Yeah.
Okay, or what was that Chris Brown song? I think maybe it was Forever.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's referenced in The Office, and everybody knows about that because it's not relegated to a particular community. Versus now, some new TikTok star who's like 12 or however old does some dance and it takes all of TikTok by storm. That's fine and all, but like my grandma has no idea about that. I remember my grandma coming to me and being like, "Oh, have you seen this new video?" And it was like, "Charlie bit my finger." And it's like, "Yeah, I've seen that, Grandma." And it's hilarious. And everyone has seen it. And it's awesome because we can all kind of chuckle at this together and have a great time.
Like, remember the... this is just going to turn into a long nostalgia trek, isn't it? But the dress.
Oh, yeah, with the different
blue
colors.
Blue and black or white and gold. Like, that connected the whole world for like...
That's a more recent example. Yeah, that's good.
But
that's a great example of a recent one.
I'm starting to wonder if I'm just getting too old for the trends, because these days I feel like when we go and we're listening to the top 50 on iTunes or whatever, half the time I'm like, what are these songs? Like, I have no idea what these are. Yeah, are we just like getting old so that we're not in with the cool kids anymore, and the cool kids have moved on to TikTok and whatever's happening there, and we're just past it? I don't know.
Yeah, but I guess what I'd say is, and music's a little bit different of an animal. I think you maybe need to go back a little bit farther to the heyday of like MTV, where they were actually playing music
Where
videos
adults
and stuff.
and kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Where you've got Michael Jackson's Thriller, when you've got Take on Me, right? I think the point though is that with some of these older videos, I literally remember my grandparents talking about things. I remember going to Thanksgiving and talking with my cousin who was not my cousin, my second cousin who was multiple years older than me, talking to him about epic mealtime, and my great aunt talking about how she loved one of the dudes on it and thought he was hilarious, right? Like we're talking about a 70-year-old and a 20-year-old and like a 14-year-old or something. Okay, so my point here is that you're saying, oh well, maybe we're too old for this. That's the exact point. It's that you used to not have to be a certain age for some of these things in the past, whereas now, yeah, you have to be under the age of 23 to understand the newest TikTok trend. And I think before, right, when I gave the example of my grandma showing me a Charlie bit my finger video, right? Now I'm like, there's this level of connection that I have with my grandma, right? We both think like, this is a funny, silly video. We can talk about that. And that can kind of lead into other conversations. Mm-hmm. Versus now, it's so fractured and fragmented, and the things that I'm talking about with somebody new, right? What used to happen is I would bring up, have you seen this? Oh my gosh, yeah, it was so funny, right? We're kind of on the same wavelength, and now we can use that as a basis to talk about other things. Whereas now, what I find happens a lot is, oh, have you seen this? No. Like, swing and a miss. Have you seen this? No. Swing and a miss. Do you listen to this podcast? No. Over your head. Right? We have no level of sync up between people.
Yeah. Well, now I feel like it's all the people who watch, CNN, they can all share over whatever CNN's saying.
Yeah.
And all the people who watch Fox News, they can be collective and share about what Fox News is saying.
Yeah, and then by the way, that's a great example. I think this also results in a level of like polarization. The more things become fragmented, the more they become polarized.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that everyone needs to listen to the same thing all the time. But I am saying that I think that some of these experiences, some of this narrative needs to be shared. I think that people need to get together in person. I think that we need to foster communities at a number of different levels. And I think that it's been, every level has seen some level of neglect. And, I think everyone should do their best, and I'd encourage everyone to do their best between one-on-one relationships and with their families. And then I'm encouraging people to reach out in their church communities, in their neighborhoods, in their cities, in their states, schools, in the nation. Like I want to see some things where everyone can get together and have a shared experience. And some of that means that, we have to compromise. Like, I don't think that Avengers Endgame or Avengers Infinity War or Spider-Man No Way Home, I don't think that this is the most amazing movie ever, right? But I think it's a fun time. I think that it matters to get people together, to have the shared narrative, to be able to talk to people about things, to get on the same wavelength with other people. And part of going to, let's say, Spider-Man No Way Home is having that experience in the theater. It's not the same if we were sitting at home watching it, right? So part of it, I think, is an encouragement to get into these physical spaces, whether that be a state fair or a county fair or a movie theater. I think getting into those physical spaces really matters.
So you're not an advocate for the metaverse?
Gosh.
Is that what I'm hearing? No metaverse, no I mean the past couple years have been, I think, have really set us back to some level there because everyone's gotten so used to just being at home away from people.
Yeah.
And I even say this as someone who I really like being at home.
I love working at home so much. I can't stress that enough. I want to just take a pause and we can circle back to this. I want to be clear. I am most definitely not technologically inept. Neither are you. I love working from home. We're on the younger side in the workforce, so and we've got kind of white collar, you'd say, like desk jobs. So we've been working from home 5 days a week, and as of late, me 4 days a week. So it's not like I'm saying, oh, let's get everyone back in person in the office. I'm not necessarily advocating for that, but I do think that people need to do that on their own time, and the communities do need to be fostered.
Somewhere, I think. Like, obviously, you can't be a heavily involved member of every type of community you find yourself in.
Yeah.
Like, I can't be heavily involved socially at my work and at my church and at my community and at my, my local city and in, all these different spheres.
Yeah. There are sacrifices that need to be made.
You need to find where you want to invest yourself in and get involved, right? I think we do that at our church a lot. I think that's kind of the main place where we try to do that, and with our families. Like, we see our family a lot and we hang out with our families and do stuff with them. I'm not saying you have to go to everything or always want to be in person around people. Like, we are two massive introverts sitting here advocating to get out and be around people.
Quite introverted, yeah.
But I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, the past couple years, I think have set us back as a society on a whole, because, like I was saying, people have gotten used to being home, not leaving their house, not being around people. Like, at our church, people got used to just watching church online.
Yeah.
That it took a long time for people to actually start coming back to church. And I think even now we still have fewer people than we did 2.5 years ago or whatever. And it's hard to get people back into it because it's easy to just stay home and isolate yourself from people. And, both physically, but also, on a emotional connective level.
Yeah.
It's easy to isolate yourself from people, and I'm not saying there's not a place or a time to do that, but humans aren't meant to be alone all the time.
Yeah, we're designed for community.
Yeah.
We are. Yeah, I think, as an introvert at least, I kind of view some of these events, and I'm not saying that I never regret going to some event or wish I hadn't, but
so often you despise going to events that I drag you to.
Gosh. But I also recognize, some of it's like I'm kind of like a child with it, like groaning, I don't want to go. I kind of got this with a book I was reading recently where it was so hard to start it. It was so hard to start the book. And finally you were just like, dude, you just got to start this book. It was one of my goals this year, every 4 months to read one book. So 3 books throughout the whole year. I know it's probably a pathetic goal to many people, but as somebody who has not done a whole lot of reading,
you like listening
as
to
of
things.
late. Yeah, usually I'm listening to things, but one of the caveats here is I'm not doing Audible or something like that. That would be very easy for me. It's that I got to sit down and actually be reading words.
Turning pages.
I think that, there's a level of vocabulary and, like written word understanding. Spelling that you help reinforce. But I'm getting off on a bit of a tangent. Anyway, I was really struggling to start this book. But once I started it, I read a whole book in 4 or 5 days.
Oh, not even. You were reading that book a lot.
Yeah.
And willingly, like in your free time, it's what you wanted to go do.
Once I got started.
You need to just get started. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you also were I had been volunteering at our church for a while, and I had been saying to you, like, come on, you should come. Yeah. You should start volunteering. And sometimes just getting started with getting involved in some way is really the hardest part. And once you
Yeah.
get into it and you're in the habit, like, it can be a very positive thing. Now, I mean, you love volunteering at church. And I think
Yeah.
it's great because it gets us meeting people and talking to people and being in this community. And I think I said this before, but that like, at least for us right now, that's really where we try to put ourselves in a situation where we're building a community of people around us or getting to know people. Is that
Yeah.
some people do that at work. Like, a lot of people that I work with are very much like, we need to get back into the office, start working together, collaborating in person. There's nothing like being in person. And some people really invest in their social community lives at work.
Sure.
To be honest, like, I'm not one of those people.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something I need to work on. I don't know. But work isn't really that place where I feel invested in trying to foster a social community that I'm around. I mean, I think I work well with the people that I work with from a technical standpoint, but I'm not the one jumping into work social events or anything.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think certain communities are easier to build than others. I mean, I went on a work trip and had a bunch of really in-depth discussions with a couple of work colleagues. It's a long story and probably one we'll address at another time. But yeah, I think sometimes, though, we fail to recognize a few of the instances where we are doing that. So, for instance, like we mentioned, we went to Spider-Man. Okay, we went to, so in the last couple of years, we've actually gone to see a fair amount of like big box movies in the theaters. But like part of that is going in and having that shared experience. And I think that, that's something that people really ought to think about and to foster. If that means that you're going into the office more, if that means that you're reaching out to your church community, I think things can be different for each person, but really fostering those communities, I think matters. And it's been really easy, like you said, during the pandemic to just kind of hole yourself up. It's real easy to say, well, I can just turn on church online, or, well, I'll just wait until it's on Netflix. I don't need to go to the theater, right? Like, what's the difference? There, you can have a much better experience sometimes when you're in the theater and you're totally focused on watching Batman and everyone's freaking out. Oh my gosh, he came on screen for the first time. I can't believe it. And people are freaking out.
Yeah, well, there's really something special about
Yeah.
experiencing something live with other people around you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were talking about your work trip that you went on, and you had a really good time meeting people and socializing at this work event.
Yeah.
I think maybe part of my challenge with work that I've had, and this is just me being, I'm not saying I know the answer to this, but just me being honest about some of the struggles I've had at work, or I just feel very isolated at work from a maybe ideological standpoint.
Yeah, your
my
worldview
work
differs.
My work is full of a lot of people with very polar opposite worldviews than me, and I have a hard time feeling like that deeper kind of what we were talking about at the beginning, sense of connection to where you share like a common set of principles or beliefs.
Yeah, a similar world view.
I have a hard time finding that at work, and
Yeah.
that's maybe part of why I don't really invest in that as a place
Sure.
for me to find a community.
Yeah. I get that. Yeah, I guess what I would challenge you with is what I would challenge you with is there are plenty of instances where I don't have similar ideological views to people, but I'm still able to hang out and chat with them and just foster relationships on a different level, right? Like you can talk about some of those things that are more high level, some of those collective experiences, like a big blockbuster movie, or
Yeah, and I do. I mean, I do have
yeah,
those kinds of conversations with my work colleagues, and I'm not saying I'm a complete hermit at work or anything. Like
sure,
I have a totally fine working relationship with all of my coworkers from what I know. I guess I just I hear sometimes like you talk about certain relationships you have with your coworkers and the kinds of deep like intellectual very vulnerable conversations you have with them, and I don't have those kind of work friends. And
sure,
part of me wishes that I did, but I've also kind of gotten to the point where maybe work just isn't the place where I'm going to invest in that. I mean, I
yeah,
am a part of like a Bible study at work, which is nice. I like going to the Bible study,
yeah.
and I go to that when I can. But just day to day, I haven't found those kinds of relationships at work.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a unique working relationship with some of my colleagues. I think it's kind of abnormal. So I don't think that comparing to what you hear my experience to be is super. I don't think it's an apt comparison. I actually think that it sounds like you chat with your work colleagues, at least enough to have a good, solid working relationship, right? Like, I think it's more about getting on the same page. It's not that you have to be best friends with everyone. It's not that when you have a lull in your schedule that you're trying to schedule something with some friend. I'm not saying that people can't have alone time at all. I'm just saying that there's a level of getting on the same page with people, of like almost calibration or getting on that same wavelength that can really help when it comes to like a work project later, and
Yeah.
that relationship building happens outside of the project just as much as it does inside.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I don't have complaints about my workplace from a professional working
Yeah.
type of standpoint, but
Well, there you go.
I just, you long for deeper, more fulfilling kinds of relationships in life.
Yeah.
And it's important for people to have those kinds of relationships. And I don't have any of those at work. And I know that
Mm-hmm.
you have some of those at work. So, not necessarily that I need those to take place at work because I have those in other parts of my life. I I just I think have recently come to a level of acceptance about maybe work isn't the place where I'm going to find those.
Yeah, I'm just saying, while yes, you need people who you can have deep intellectual conversations with, and who you can have very similar values to and talk about complex topics with, and that's critical and really valuable. The flip side is it's actually quite valuable to have a number of relationships where it's just a basketball buddy, or
Yeah.
you just like
And it's good to have
talking about
relationships
movies or
with
whatever.
people who think differently than you too.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
you don't want to just get in a bubble of people who only think the same as you,
Yeah.
right? You can easily venture into, echo chamber type of scenarios, and that's not what I'm trying to do in my life. But even no matter the kind of relationship with you have with someone, like there needs to be certain grounding principles that you can agree on,
Yeah.
even if you have wild wildly diverse types of people that you're friends with in terms of very diverse different worldviews, perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
beliefs about things. If you're not aligned on core principles, it's going to be hard to have any level of meaningful relationship with them.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is sometimes the relationship can just be it it can just be for a slight level of fun. Okay, for instance, we play frisbee, right?
Mm-hmm.
We hang out with people and play frisbee. Okay? Ultimate, it's a pretty large group of people. People come when they have the ability to just kind of
Yeah,
pick up frisbee games.
we're not
And
best buds with
yeah,
them
we're
though.
not best buds with
But
them. Sometimes they'll go catch a drink after, get some appetizers or something. Okay. but plenty of people don't go to that. And, sometimes it's good to just get out there and, those friends are just people who I have a good workout with, and we get to, understand and try and work together as a team towards a goal in kind of a unique facet of life, which is, a game that's not played by everyone and their grandma. It's great to have relationships like that too. So ultimately, I would urge you guys, get out there, try and meet up with some people in person, have those experiences with other people so that we have shared narrative on a number of different levels, on an individual level, within families, within communities, within cities and states and the country, and maybe even the world with some of these things. I think that'll help people to have a better understanding of each other, have more sympathy and empathy for each other, and allow us to have conversations later. Because some events like that, you see us in the workplace. You need some of these team building events that have nothing to do with your day-to-day work, and it actually matters. A lot of that stuff is psychologically based and stuff that I think that we need to do on all of those levels so that we can have a functioning relationship, family, and society. Well, it's getting late. A couple days ago, I was thinking about a memory from my past where I'd gone to the bathroom and, I had come out of the bathroom and my fashionista mom and the rest of my family kind of was laughing at me because my shirt was still tucked into my waistband and in kind of the front area. Maybe the front quarter of my torso had my shirt tucked in, and the rest, it wasn't tucked in at all. And they were laughing at me. This was maybe 8 years ago. I thought that was funny because a few days ago we were at church and I saw a number of people walking around and their shirts were tucked in like that. And I want to say a year or two ago, I saw my sister doing this and my mom commented on it, and my sister said this is a new style. It's what all the hip cool kids do. I thought it was funny. I was likening back to the time when my family was teasing me for that. So I don't know if I'm a trendsetter or if everyone else is just being silly now. I kind of think it's the latter because I'm definitely not a stylish person. But that's just what I've been musing about recently. Thank you again, everyone, for listening. If you have an idea, something you want to talk about, feel free to shoot us an email at secondpartypodcast@gmail.com. It's all spelled out. If you send in an audio clip, a voice memo, you may be featured on the show. We'd love to address topics that you guys are interested in, be able to comment on some things. So feel free to give us a shout. Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and have a good night. On. You done? Okay, so if there's nothing else that you need, I should stop recording. Okay.